Welcome back to another episode of Email Beyond Revenue. I'm delighted to be joined today by Edward Upton, who is the founder of Littledata. And today he is going to share a strategy related to server-side tracking as it pertains to email, SMS, or retention marketing. So without further ado, Ed, feel free to take it away from here.
Thank you, Adam, for having me on. Yeah, so we've Littledata. We've been in the sort of server-side tracking world for nearly 8 years and developed some great solutions for supporting paid ads. And then last year we found we could use a very similar technology to help really boost the revenue from abandonment flows on Klaviyo. So the challenge and the problem we're solving is that you've got all your flows set up. Klaviyo is great at building those triggers and automations, but a lot of the time when someone, let's say, abandons cart on your site because they haven't actually got to start the checkout, you don't know who they are. There's no email or SMS and a phone number associated with that. So you know they're active on your storefront. You just can't link that to someone who's you can email on your list because it's an identity problem. You don't know it's the same person. And so what Littledata is able to do is better identity resolution. We can track using our own script who's active in your storefront, and we can triangulate that using our own identity graph based on not only third-party data. We don't use anything what I would call grey or dodgy here. It's just simply all the touch points they've had previously on your Shopify store. So maybe they previously signed up for a newsletter, or they clicked through on an email, or they just visited a previous session that the cookies got lost. And we can join those dots together so that when you start to trigger an abandoned cart, and in fact it works equally well for abandoned browse, product viewed event, or checkout started, we can make sure that more people receive that email. Klaviyo does all the delivery and so on, and then obviously with more people receive it, they actually purchase. And what's interesting, because people are skeptical that hey, this isn't this like something on the sidelines that isn't going to really get a few more clicks, but these are low quality traffic. It's not low quality traffic. These are people who are buy ready. They've already got to a stage in the shopping funnel where they've chosen the product and so on. They're typically abandoning because they get interrupted, there's a payment issue, they left their card upstairs, whatever it is. And so if you can reach more of these people, you can really drive more revenue through email. So let me just show you a little bit how this works in practice. So the very simple proposition with the data is that we can double that revenue from abandoned carts. And you can see here just a quick screenshot of classic. They had an existing abandoned cart flow set up, triggered by the added cart event, which is the Klaviyo one. And then they duplicated the flow, got exactly the same flow, exactly the same messaging and content emails, but just triggered by Littledata's trigger. And what we can see is immediately we're able to drive, in this case, nearly 3 times the revenue from that same flow. So what we're able to do is say to uplift the audience by de-anonymizing these visitors. So not everyone is on your site. Obviously 80-90% of people who visit your store is still just all you know them is by some anonymous cookie ID. But for those 10-20% of people who you have seen before and they are an identifiable person, we can boost that flow, and we means that more people emails get triggered, and that means better retargeting of your opted list. You're using your email list that you already have, marrying that with people who are active on your storefront, and that makes it completely GDPR and CTPA compliant. We're not adding any people to the list. We're simply retargeting the ones that are there. So to put it another way, what we can do is help to trigger email slightly further up the funnel. So Klaviyo has a very reliable trigger for people who get to the second step of the checkout. That's when they enter the email that they've actually said, hey, I am this person. Now, obviously, you can trigger at that point because they can't get to that stage of the checkout without entering an email. But the thing is that only 3% of people get that far. So what you need to be able to do to drive revenue is to be able to target people higher up the funnel. Now, using Shopify standard benchmarks, there are double the number of people, 6% of people, who actually start to add to cart, but then half of them drop off by the time they get to that Klaviyo trigger. So Littledata triggers can use all the same product and customer data you have on the checkout. You can target it based on a product category or a value of the cart or so on, but just triggering it for 2 times the number of people. And as I said, it's totally backwards compatible with the Klaviyo triggers, so you don't need to do any kind of rejigging of the email template. So we're not a reporting tool. You're not going to come to the data and to see kind of, what's going on. We're not trying to be analytics tool, but what we're trying to do is boost that that revenue capture by being able to better identify people in your storefront. So yes, that's really my top tip. I guess I'd end by just saying it is extremely easy to set up. So typically installing is just about installing the Littledata app, connecting your Klaviyo account, and then you can just go into Klaviyo, duplicate the flow, and you'll be able to, when you have that option, you select Littledata's trigger for the drop down. And then obviously the final thing you do is, so that you don't send people two emails, you just set an exclusion rule that says if they got the first one, they got the original flow, then don't send the second one. And that also, apart from making sure your customers only get one email, it also means you can see very quickly what the incremental revenue is, where Littledata's trigger is only going to fire if people didn't get the original one. So you can be 100% certain that is going to be incremental over what you would have got with that Littledata. And typically it's a very high return investment. We see brands doing between 10 and 50x what they pay Littledata in their email revenue. So I know there's a number of tools out there that might claim to boost this stuff, but at a cost. We're saying, look, it's a big performance boost at a very low cost.
Absolutely. And just to go over, Ed, to explain as well the key touch points and flows that people need to set up. We're talking about the abandoned cart, checkout, and I'm assuming the browse abandonments, right? Are those
Correct,
the three main core ones? Yep.
Those are the main drivers. And as I said, abandon checkout, Klaviyo already does pretty well, but the difference between our trigger is it happens on the first step of the checkout, i.e. before they've entered the email. So that's obviously more people. The abandoned the abandoned cart events, traditionally the problem there is that there was no out-of-the-box added to cart event with Klaviyo. If you've upgraded the latest version of Klaviyo's tracking since the last 6 months, you do at least get that event triggered, but it still doesn't perform as well as our one. And then, as I said, with abandoned browse, that really is an identity resolution problem. You're higher up the funnel, and Klaviyo can trigger that event out the box. But the problem is, for most people, it doesn't link to any profiles. There's no one's actually getting those emails.
Yep. And any other specific use cases that you've seen people deploy this in Klaviyo, Attentive, or any email platform beyond those flows? Is there any creative ways people can get more out of this tracking and infusion of data?
Yeah. Well, just before I go on to that, I meant you mentioned Attentive, and we've just launched the same product for Attentive email and SMS. So, by the way, it works for email and SMS here. It's all about the same tech, and interchangeable whether they've used email or phone. We can identify using either. But we've launched the same thing for Attentive. So if you're using that just for SMS, you can get a nice synergy between the two. Other useful use cases. So I think with the actually kind of making the flows better segmented and more personalized, I think two things stand out. The first is to be able to do a trigger split based off the value of the cart. So typically you want to send a different message if people are above or below the free shipping threshold. Add one more product to get free shipping, or you're already there. You've got free shipping. Again, you can do that on abandoned checkout, but what you want to be able to do that is on the abandoned cart events as well. And then the other thing, and particularly for abandoned browse, we're talking about here is to be able to doing different splits based on either the value of the product or the product category. So you might want to have a kind of different creative field of the message or different promoted products based on the product category. And so again, because we've got sort of rich metadata for each of those events, you can do this very easily within Klaviyo once you have it's all, because in Klaviyo all the product data is linked to the trigger. So you can't really, even though you might have a separate product category for Shopify, you can't kind of use it within the flow unless it's actually linked to that trigger. And then I think finally the interesting thing is, kind of how this boosts other flows that you've got running. So, for example, a lot of people using Klaviyo for basically retention for, let's say, recurring order subscriptions. Now, again, your kind of ability to personalize those messages is only as good as the customer profile data in Klaviyo. So let's say, for example, someone's subscribing to regular dog food, but they've been back on your store looking at cat food. Now, you might, if you didn't know that, or you couldn't link that behavior to the person, you might be triggering a message saying, "Hey, you haven't bought dog food for a while. Let's push you some more dog food." Well, my dog died 2 years ago, 2 months ago, and I don't need that anymore. But I'm interested in cat food. So the interesting thing is, if we can help all of these extra touch points enrich those Klaviyo
Yep.
profiles. So Klaviyo talks a lot about being a customer data platform, but this is where the sharp end of that vision comes in. Unless I actually know that you are the same person that was on my store browsing cat food, I can't send you a message that's relevant to your needs right now.
Yeah, I think that's so critical to point out as well, especially when you talk about it in the context of this CDP, which they like to posture as. It's absolutely critical that you're enriching the profiles and collecting data so that you're able to personalize customer journeys off there. So completely agree with you. Okay, Ed, easiest way for someone to get started, give us the quick elevator pitch. Where can you go?
Well, it's super easy. We offer a free 30-day free trial for everyone because typically obviously you want to sort of see a couple of weeks before you get going. In terms of the install experience, as I said, you would add our Littledata app, very simple in the App Store. You would choose to add the email SMS bundle, and for that you get Klaviyo and Attentive if you're using one or both. You can then just go into our dashboard, click to start the connection. You can choose which triggers you want, by default all of them. And then finally, you just go and click to connect your Klaviyo accounts, single sign on, and then we just do all the tracking happens automatically. And then the only final event you need to do to get started is just to go in and actually change. These are all the things we're sending and the triggers you can use from Littledata. And then instead, you can just go in and clone your existing flow, set out a Littledata version of that, and test it out. And as I said, honestly, I don't think we've had a single customer that's not had at least 40% improvement within that free trial. So it is just free money. I can't put it any simpler than that.
Yep, no, absolutely. We've seen it as well for our clients and anyone who's installed a similar solution. It's probably as close to low-hanging fruits that you can get, especially if you already have some type of setup. I mean, we're talking about under 30 minutes, even for someone who's not tech savvy here, because it's just click and connect.
Now, it doesn't remove the need for you to do good creative and messaging and branding on all those flows and do the spade work of setting them up. But what I always say is, look, if you're engaging with a great agency to do that, you're spending the dollars to actually get all that stuff nice and working well. This is just a little incremental bit you can add on to that and get greater return on investment. So it's totally additive to all of the other work you're doing to improve your retention marketing and your flow messaging.
Yep, agree. Great. Appreciate you coming on, sharing that, Ed. And I will drop the links for anyone who wants to follow up and connect with you on LinkedIn. But thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam, for having me.